So I'm really excited about the next portion of our program because we're going to profile 3 exciting emerging markets. To kick off the first of the 3 sessions that we have set up today, I'm going to welcome my friends over at ABCAP and Apex Brazil and Deriac. They're a big supporter of this program every year. And Pedro, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate your support. So we're going to kick off the first session of the next 3. You can start taking your stage, yeah. We're going to kick off the first session of the next 3. So this will focus on Brazil. And then we're going to focus on Canada, and then we're going to focus on Africa. And everybody that's with us on stage this afternoon is going to be here all afternoon and back tomorrow. So please take the time to speak with them because they're excited to form partnerships with corporates and learn more about open innovation models that can support some of the founders out of these regions. So again, to welcome to the stage Pedro Ferreira of Deriac, and then we have Daniel from Embraer. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Apex and ABCAP, for making this happen. So we have Daniel here. Daniel is, I have a brother, his name is Daniel too, so it's difficult to call you Daniel in English. So Daniel is here. He's the CEO of Embraer X. Daniel, can you tell us a little bit about Embraer and Embraer X?
Of course. Thank you, Pedro. Thanks for the invitation. It's a very nice opportunity for us. So Embraer is the 3rd largest aircraft manufacturer globally. People don't talk a lot about Embraer, but I can place a bet most of you in this room have already flown one of our jets. If you get inside the plane and there are no middle seats, it's Embraer you have to thank, just window and aisle. So those are our E1 jets and the newest E2 jets. We are also present in the executive jets market. We have for 12 years in a row the best-selling executive jet globally. It's the Phenom 300. And we have a 3rd business unit, which is the defense, the military operation that is also very important for us. Embraer X is a company we started much more recently. Embraer, the mother company, is 55 years old this year, and Embraer X is an incubator, a market accelerator that we launched here in Silicon Valley back in 2017.
Okay, we will explore the creation of Embraer X in a few minutes, but first, as an expert in airplanes, so I understand that we have been 10 years in Embraer. Easy ice break, but maybe a tough question for you. Who invented the airplanes?
I love to receive this question, especially here in the US, because here people learn a lot about the Wright brothers, but it's very hard to find a reference to the name of a Brazilian pioneer, Alberto Santos Dumont. If you look very hard in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, in Washington, D.C., you will find Santos Dumont credited. He was the first person to fly a self-propelled aircraft, heavier than air, that could take off by its own means. So he was the first person to do that, not the Wright brothers.
Good. Well, I'm relieved that my school touched me right there.
In Brazil, we always learn about Santos Dumont. We go out of Brazil, nobody heard of him. Except in France. I'll give the credit to the French. They give a lot of recognition because most of his test flights and developments took place in Paris.
All right. So before they kick us out, let's talk about CVC a little bit. Embraer was one of the first early adopters of CVC, especially they incorporate a fund back in 2014, in a time that in Brazil we barely talk about CVC, we barely have corporates looking to invest in venture capital. Can you tell us a little bit about like the highlights, the challenges, and what you guys learned from this experience? That is, well, your fund is completely like the 10-year circle right now.
Yeah, of course. It was really a time when there was very low maturity in Brazil. I cannot promise we were the first big company to create a CVC in Brazil. I know there are some multinational companies like Qualcomm, Microsoft that had something going on in Brazil, Latin America back then, but very few companies, especially as compared to today, when I believe most of the big Brazilian corporations do have some nice initiatives going on. But when Embraer started, it was a very interesting story from an innovation perspective, because the idea came bottom up and not top down. One of our engineers joined our entrepreneurship program with that business proposition. He was an expert in the field. He had a PhD in venture capital, and he knew how this was really a key success factor for innovation strategy for big corporations worldwide. So he challenged the board of Embraer. Why shouldn't we, as a high-tech company, a global company, we operate globally, our product needs to be competitive, including from a technology perspective, you know, with other companies from across the globe. He came up with the idea, let's build our own CVC. It was not that easy to get the approval. But eventually, there was a lot of discussion and convincing done. And we were, I would say, fortunate enough that we had partners that joined our first initiative back then, which were the Brazilian National Development Bank, BNDES, the Brazilian Federal Innovation Agency, FINEP, and the State of São Paulo Innovation Agency, Desenvolve São Paulo. So the three of them as public entities that are very committed to foster innovation in Brazil, they helped us operationalize our very first fund. And we were all LPs in that first fund, where Embraer ended up being, maybe I could call it this way, the single strategic investor, but allowed us to start taking a first step in that journey, make our first investments, create our first portfolio of companies, which was a fantastic learning journey for us. Through our portfolio companies, we ended up learning about new markets where Embraer was not present. Maybe the most interesting example is the one on cybersecurity. We had 3 or 4 cybersecurity companies in the portfolio. That was an adjacent market to what we did in defense business, for example. But it allowed us to understand how cybersecurity works also in the private sector, in the financial system of Brazil, that of course is highly sophisticated system. So it was a big step forward for us through the CVC to understand that market and eventually incorporate cybersecurity into the very strategic plan of Embraer for the coming years.
Very nice. So let's shift a little bit to Eve, that I know that you call your third daughter.
That's true. Yes, I have 2 biological daughters and 1 entrepreneurship daughter, which is Eve Air Mobility, yes.
I have 3 biological daughters, and it's tough to deal with that. But specifically, I would ask you to tell us about the process to spin off. It was a project that was created like a venture builder inside Embraer. And how was the process? Embraer used to be a public a company that was controlled by the Brazilian government, state-owned company.
Yes.
And then it went public, but still have a lot of control as a defense company. So my guess is that spinning off like a project of the Embraer would be very challenging. Can you tell us a little bit about this process?
It was quite an adventure, indeed. Yeah. So you remembered well, Embraer was privatized back in the 90s, and today is a full corporation. We have our shares in New York Stock Exchange, São Paulo Stock Exchange. The government of Brazil retained just what we call the golden share for specifically national security reasons. So they have no operational say, but they can have like veto rights in the case, for example, of a complete takeover of Embraer, the government of Brazil, because of the Brazilian Air Force, can veto that type of operation. Apart from that, is a full cooperation, right? But I think you made a good point. There is always some conservativeness in the way we make our decisions. We are number 3 in the world, but our scale does not allow us to make big mistakes.
Yes.
Embraer has to be very cautious where we allocate our capital and how we prioritize our investments. In the aviation industry, any new product, we're talking about billion-dollar type of investments, and that's very critical for the company's survival. So when we launched Embraer X and immediately identified that market opportunity with urban air mobility, and that is per se is an interesting story, because it all began with a technology constraint around batteries. We were looking about battery-powered flights.
Yes.
If Santos Dumont, the Brazilian pioneer, was the first one to fly a heavier than air machine, we were now thinking, can we pioneer electric aviation?
We will.
And have a full battery-powered flight. And then we realized that, okay, but batteries, they are heavy, right? The amount of energy you can carry in 1 kilogram of a battery is 1,000 times less than a kilogram of jet fuel. So it really limits, it constrains how far can you go and how much weight can you carry. So it looks like a showstopper, a no-starter. But eventually, when we set up Embraer X, right, here in Silicon Valley, and started to exchange ideas and insights with other investors, companies, competitors as well, we realized that there is a market opportunity for a very short range flight inside of the city. So our niche market is connect city to city. But we realized that because of bad traffic, if you take the top 100 metropolis of the world, there is a clear market for people who could avoid a 2-hour traffic jam flying over like 10, 15-minute flight, especially if it's affordable, if it's the same price level of the ground transportation. And that's not a dream. It's viable if you completely disrupt the way you think about the technology to make it happen. And battery-powered gives us a potential to get there. The flights will be short, 10 to 15 minutes, but it's enough. It's more than enough to cover for like 90% of the demand of mobility inside of the cities. So that, you know, some analysts, not Embraer saying, but big consultancy companies that studied that market, McKinsey, KPMG, and others, predict it's like $1 trillion market by 2040. So we decided to go for it. We decided to start, you know, incubating that opportunity, looking at the vehicle itself, but also the ecosystem, the air traffic management, which is another expertise we happen to have in-house. We started to talk to partners. How would that ecosystem work? And that kept maturing and kept, you know, growing to a certain level when we finally realized this opportunity is getting ready to take off, but it has outgrown Embraer X, the incubator. Now, if we really want to go all in and we want to talk serious about it, we need to scale up really fast. And that's not something we can possibly do alone. Not just because of capital constraints, risk involved, but also, you know, knowledge, partners from other sectors and industries that would be very critical if we were to be successful. So that's how we started the conversation with our board to organize what was previously a project, organize it as a company, and then get approval to spin off that company, which eventually took place in 2020. But it was a hard journey of convincing and pros and cons. But eventually we spun off Eve Air Mobility, started a capital raise.
How did it go after the spin-off?
It's been great. I mean, in just a couple of years, we went straight to an IPO. It was probably the last successful SPAC in the US market. the last opportunity before the special purpose acquisition companies disappeared from eyesight. But we received an unsolicited offer from a SPAC that we found was very, very interesting, because it was not, a full SPAC in terms of generic acquisition company. That was a company set up by aviation experts. They were all aviation old-timers, pioneers in the aviation market here in the US. They assembled a very strong team of, board members, advisors. And from the start of the SPAC, they were focused on air mobility. And they had looked around the globe in all the companies developing eVTOLs and urban air mobility, evaluated all of them, and came to the conclusion that because of the Embraer backing and 50+ years legacy, Eve Air Mobility was really a very differentiated type of play. So they came up with the offer, we decided to take it, and Eve went straight to the IPO. We rang the bell on Wall Street. May 2022 was an amazing experience. And ever since, Eve has been, progressing on the development of the business, of the vehicle, the air traffic system, but has also been amassing orders, letters of intent from all the 5 continents. We have almost 3,000 orders for this vehicle that is under development from all different sorts of, categories of customers. We're talking about airlines, of course, but helicopter operators, ride-sharing platforms, you name it. So it's a very diverse set of customers and investors that came on board to help us turn this dream into a reality.
Very nice to hear that. And we have like 4 minutes left. And we are in a panel to talk about investments in Latin America.
Of course.
What can you tell us about the environment over there, especially comparing like the beginning that you guys had in 2014, so 10 years after? So should these guys here in the audience go there to check? What you can say to them?
That's a great question, because we've been so impressed with how fast the market has been maturing ever since we started to be a part of it, right? So back 10 years ago, about 10 years ago when we started, as I mentioned, was not a lot of maturity, not a lot of companies, target companies, and not a lot of investors either. Yes. So it was, still in the making. But 10 years later, you fast forward to where we are today, it's a highly dynamic market, right? So we've, of course, had our downturn in recent 2 years, but overall, it's an upward curve. Most of the big corporations present in Latin America today, either domestic or multinational companies, they do operate their own CVCs. In Brazil, this market is really gaining a lot of maturity, and investments is on the rise over this period. We also see diversification. So in the beginning, it was all about fintech, right? Yes. And it's still very strong to this day. We have a very sophisticated financial system. I think I made reference to that. Even our government is very innovative when it comes to finance, right? We launched the PIX model from the Central Bank of Brazil. Yes. It's an immediate transaction to transfer cash from one party to the other. The compensation is real time. You don't find that in many other places of the world. So it's a good legacy from a bad time we had with hyperinflation in the 80s. It made the Brazilian financial system very sophisticated. So it's not a surprise that the first wave of startups and unicorns all came or mostly concentrated in fintech. But if you look, I just checked on the ranking of the unicorns globally. Brazil is in the top 10 list, is back to the top 10. We are back to the top 10 economies globally in GDP. And yes, in terms of number of unicorns, Brazil and Latin America are doing great. And it's not just fintech anymore. We're starting to see more hard tech, deep tech, of course, a lot of software companies, but there's agriculture, there is, many interesting plays. And still, for what I would say, especially comparing to US, where we also invest in CVC here in the US. When we compare the valuations, even with the recent adjustments, you know, it's an order of magnitude of difference. You can find very high potential companies in Latin America for a fraction of the valuations you would see here in the US. It's, of course, takes an effort to engage and understand the market. It's very useful to have good partners, and I know for this event here, we have a nice mission, about 30 plus people from Brazil with support from Apex, ABV Cap. I know they're very open to support investors who may be interested to come to Latin America. It's an interesting time to come, I would say, from nice valuations and a system that is getting mature very fast.
Okay, I think our time is running out. I would endorse Daniel's invitation, talk to Apex, talk to ABV Cap. We have a big group here of Brazilians, a lot of guys that are doing investments in CVCs for the past years. Indeed, the ecosystem in Brazil grew a lot. I would say that 5 years ago, we don't even have a unicorn, and now we are in the top 10 list.
We are in the top 10 list.
So, and well, I would love to invite you guys to have a closer look in Brazil. And tonight we have a karaoke night for the Brazilians. We are also welcome. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you.